Okay, so I'm not sure if we did this last year, but I do think it's an important point. So we noted that by the end of this negotiation with Paro, advice to Paro about what type of leader he should get. So Paro says, well, obviously you're the right person because you are the person who has Ruach Elokim Bo, right? After God has shown you all of this, I can find no one better than you. Now, admittedly, after we talked about the complexity of the job that this leader has to have, so the right answer might be whoever God inspires has the best chance. But the real question is, how did we get there, right? Meaning it's sort of shocking where Yosef just gives him advice and says, you need someone who's Navon, Chacham, and Paro goes into this theological reflection, turns to all of his people and says, has anyone ever seen someone inspired by God in this way? Right? That's actually, when you think about it, a very surprising turn of events, right? That makes Paro choose Yosef isn't just that he sees that he's wise, but is this recognition of that God is with Yosef, and that's a necessary quality for this leader. So how do we get there? And so here in Nechama Leivich's first piece on Miketz, she does this really wonderful analysis where she says it's actually very clear how we got here. And it goes like this. So already we see that God has this, that Yosef has this way of bringing God into the conversation in general. So we saw this twice before we get to this story, right? Once is in the context of Potiphar, right? Eshet Potiphar, where instead of just saying, look, it's bad, and Potiphar, trust me, which he also says, he says, I can't do this, I'll sin against God. But already in the context of dream interpretation, when at the end of last week's parsha, when he's asked to interpret the dreams of the Sarah Mashkim and the Sarah Ofim, so what does he say? Hello, Lelokim Petronim, right? Interpretation belongs to God, not to me. But when it comes to Paro, it's much more systematic. Because how does the speech start off? So first, Paro, he's struggling, he doesn't know what to do, no one can interpret his dreams sufficiently, so eventually he gets the advice from the Sarah Mashkim to get this guy out of jail, this slave out of jail, because he knows how to interpret dreams. And what does Paro say to him? What does he say? Remember what he says? Paro says to him, I've heard that what? That you interpret dreams. And what does Yosef answer? I don't interpret dreams. Ha'elokim yanet shlom Paro. Right? God can offer, right? God will tell you what's going on. And he keeps doing this. When he interprets the dream and he says, oh, there's going to be 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine, how does he phrase that? That which God is going to do, he has told to Paro. Right? And then he launches into the explanation, right? He says, God is giving you this dream because he's telling you what he's going to do. He's going to bring 7 years of famine after the 7 years of plenty. And he says this multiple times. Right? He says it at the beginning, he says it in the middle, right? What God is about to do, he's shown Paro. He says it both at the, in each interpretation of the dream, he says this. And then when he gets to the end, he says, and why did you have the dream twice? Right? Why did you have the chalom pa'amayim? Right? Because God is ready to do this quickly. And therefore you have two dreams, so that God is going to bring it close to pass. So at first glance, you just see, okay, he consistently says God, 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 God. Okay, very good, right? So that's part of it. But Nechama pushes it even farther, and she says, well, actually, there are three stages to Yosef's speech, right? First, the first stage is he explains that the cows and the ears of corn both mean years, and the two dreams are one, right? That's stage one of his speech, right? Stage two is the explanation of the symbols and what they mean. And the third stage of his speech is the rescue plan, right? That's a fair description, right? First is the code to the dreams, right? Then is the interpretation of the dreams, and then the advice that emerges from the dreams, right? Those are the three stages of that. And she notes that this God speech, right? God is telling you what he wants you to know. This is what God is about to do, right? God is bringing this quickly. Is the first pasuk in each of the three sections, right? So as he's explaining the code, he says, well, this is God telling you, Paro, what you want to know. Here's the code to your speech, part one. Then he says, and God is telling you this because he wants to tell you what he's about to do. Here's what those symbols mean. And then third, and God is going to do this very quickly, so this is what you need to do to solve the problem. Right? So it's not just that he says God multiple times, it's that each time he brings up a theme, he precedes that with a statement of God is telling you what, right? God is giving you a message. This is what God is telling you, and this is what you should do because God is going to do this right now. And she argues that, right, it's this that brings Paro to the recognition of God. Because then she pushes it even one step farther, and she says, essentially, by doing this, she shows that God is behind the scenes, right? She writes, Joseph in these verses refers to God as the power behind the scenes, as the doer, the shower, the declarer, and the bringer to pass. Right? Meaning each of these things, he's showing that God does something else. He's conveying a message, right? He's the one who's going to bring about this, right? The first one is God is telling you something. Second is God is telling you something because he's the one who's going to bring the famine, right? And God is, right, telling you this because he's going to bring it to happen soon, right? He's in full control, right? Each time he's adding something about God's role, increasing God's role. And therefore, right, she argues that this is essentially how he gets power to recognize God. Right? He didn't lecture him about God, but he peppers his speech in the proper places to talk about God, to highlight that God is the one to convey your information. He's the one that's doing. He's the one who has a plan. He's the one that wants you to do something, right? So that every part of what he's telling Paro, God's role is made very, very clear. And she argues that that's why by the end, Paro is convinced that the only way to solve this is the person of Ruach Elokim Bo, right? Because, and as she says, right, Pharaoh, king of Egypt, defers for the first time to the supreme king of kings, right? And I think she's right? That if you read the speech carefully, the reason that Paro gets to this point is because not just that he talks about God a lot, but it's strategic, right? Each time he introduces a theme, right? The decoding, the actual message, the plan, she makes it clear that God is necessary to make sure that this stage makes sense, and that's what convinces Paro that the only solution is not just a leader, right? And that's the interesting thing is in the last stage, Yosef doesn't say you need a divinely inspired leader. He says you need a practical leader. And Paro takes it further than Yosef and says, no, no, no. Based on what you said, I got it. The only way that I'm going to get someone with that type of wisdom is if it's someone who I have evidence that God infused him with that wisdom. Okay? Fine. Let's